So welcome everyone to this week's Impulse. Um, yeah, absolutely, Deanna, that's great. New position, and you're absorbing some information. That is awesome. And what we're going to do today, we're going to talk and we'll kind of start it off this way, where we'll talk a little bit about what are some of the things on the horizon. So I'll talk about what's on the horizon for Madison College in terms of development um, in Acadicus, and sort of where we're going with it. And this will be sort of non-medical related, to be honest. Since usually I'm only talking about medical related stuff, it's actually going to be kind of a nice change. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I might show some visuals of one of our scenes in here. And then Rick, I'm sure you probably know a few things that are on the horizon that I may not know at the moment. Um, but we can talk about that as well. And then Deanna, I
Sure
would love.
thing.
Oh, sorry, Rick.
I was gonna say, yeah, sure thing.
Awesome, awesome. And then Deanna, I would love if you would be willing to do so to just kind of hear from you on how you feel things are going in that new position and ways that I don't know, maybe you could use some support or something like that. You can obviously put that in the Q&A and or if you'd like to talk, we can make it possible for you to talk as well. So
Yeah,
um
Deanna, you get to be our special guest today, so take full advantage of it.
Most definitely. And, it's nice to hear from people that are just starting off. Sometimes you hear from people like myself or Rick or people who've been doing virtual reality now for, 5 years, me 5 years, Rick probably more. Um, you know, Obviously John and the crew at Acadicus much more than myself. And so we've gotten to where we are, but it's taken 5 years to get there, right? So like this was a step process for us at the college. And it's nice to hear from some people who are really just starting out, because there's going to be other people that are going to want to listen to this and go, yeah, that's really great. Bill's got that 12 bay XR center and all of that. I don't have any of that, so I have no idea how I'm going to start that out. I don't know what to do. And maybe that's what we'll talk about too in like the second half here is like, how did we get started? Like, what did we do? And then, how can we help other people that need a good start in virtual reality? So that could be a great way to go as well. Now, people who know me know I have a tendency to be long-winded, so I have to be careful about that. So I'm going to try to make pauses in my talking today, so it's not just Bill talking to everyone, you know. So if there's questions, if there's comments, anything, please don't hesitate to just butt in. I am long-winded and I talk fast. And welcome Mitch. Mitch is here as well. So let's talk a little bit about the horizon. Um, so when we first started off in when I first started off in virtual reality back in 2019, I looked at it as a way to add
Hey,
some
Mitch.
some better visuals to my lecture classes. I wasn't even originally looking at it as a way to do simulation, right? So I wasn't really even looking at it in that way. And as a matter of fact, when I had people who used to call it VR simulation, I was like, well, hold on, because I don't want to just look at it as a sim tool. I want to look at it as a lecture tool as well. And mainly that was what I was using it for. I wasn't even really using it for simulation. I was using it to teach um, to teach cardiology. I was using it as a way to have a really nice visual to go along with my teaching, because I don't use PowerPoint, and I stopped using PowerPoint. I used to use it, but I stopped using it because I just felt like I was standing there reading off the PowerPoint, and the students kind of got to the point where they were like, ugh, PowerPoint again. So I started looking at different directions. This was years and years ago that I started looking in different directions. But then when virtual reality came along, I was like, oh, this could really enhance my teaching and not just my simulation. Now, obviously, I mean, Acadicus is a sim lab and it's an awesome sim lab, but there's just so much more that I could do with it as well. And so, excuse me, for me, it started off, medical field. How can I do that? But one of our programs that came along pretty quickly, actually, was our botany program. Our botany program looked at it as a tool for for how to sort of analyze teamwork, right? To look at like how did the students work really well together? How did they not work really well together? Taking out the visuals that we normally have of being in a classroom and looking at each other. Right? So we're in a classroom, we're looking at each other and all of that, and it does add a different degree to it when it's just sort of blue head and blue hands. And I actually kind of like it where it takes away some of that. So I'm not so focused on, and I can't read now. Obviously, many times we want to be able to read people's faces and we want to kind of understand what they're doing by looking at their face. But we can also work on just our pure communication, not how we look at each other, but just on our pure communication by taking away that facial visual. Anyway, so the botany class, one of the things that they talked about was doing some teamwork exercises. And they already had a simulation that they did that they didn't do it in virtual reality or anything like that. It was done on paper, and it was how to grow plants on Mars and to sustain life. So how are we going to sustain life on Mars? We're going to have to grow crops. What are those crops going to be used for? How are those crops going to be useful? And ergo, what resources are we going to have to worry about? Nitrogen, oxygen, water, all of those kind of things that we're going to have to think about in terms of resources to grow these plants. And so they started off really just thinking about it as a team building exercise. And what they were doing was they were going to Mars and they were rolling dice to determine what part of the team they would be. And then within the virtual reality platform, they had to work together to decide how they were going to plan that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen here, and I'm just going to show you what the sort of the visual of this. Let me minimize these out of the way. So I'm going to show you sort of the visual of the Mars base. And here's the dice, right? And it started off with just this dice on Mars. None of that stuff that you see over there. Never mind that for now. We'll get back to that. But it started off with rolling dice on Mars, making that roll, and then having to learn communication without being able to do things like facial recognition and those kind of things. And then how they were going to now team up and use this area and this atmosphere. So here's Mars, by the way. And it's pretty amazing, to be honest. When you go into it in VR, it's really, really neat. So some of these assets came directly from places like NASA, that kind of stuff. They had the 3D rover, I think already that you could just download. So basically what's going to happen with our students now, this is the beta version of it because it's still in development. What's going to happen with our students is they're going to go into these pods or something like it, and they're going to learn how to set up the plants, where they're going to be, what resources they're going to use, how many resources they're going to use. They're really going to have like an in-depth simulated exercise on how to grow plant life on Mars and how to sustain human life, and all of the sort of things that go along with that. It's a pretty complex scenario. And admittedly, I don't know that much about botany, but the beauty of it is that the sequencer that goes along with it is actually made for a person like me who has really no experience in botany. I mean, I'm a medical person. I don't really know anything about growing plants anywhere. Even in my backyard, I'm pretty terrible at it. So that's where we're going to be at now. I'm going to go in the side of this, which maybe I shouldn't do, but there we go. So I started off by just placing a bunch of plants in here, and this is just the beta so that the students can kind of get an idea of what they're going to see when they eventually come in and how all these plants are going to be utilized. But they're going to have a big feedback board as well that's going to tell them, once they use this plant, this is how much water is going to be used, or this is how much nitrogen, those kind of things. And it's pretty awesome. And that we just had our sort of I wouldn't say final meeting, but one of our final meetings on that 2 days ago on how we're going to have this all set up. So we use this for our botany class, which is sort of out of the norm of what I think about when I think about Acadicus. I think a lot about the medical portion of it, but then this is outside of that realm with our botany class. So I'm going to stop sharing there for a second, and I'm just going to check chat and all of that.
Looks pretty quiet right now, Bill.
Sure does. All right, no problem.
Well, but you bring up some interesting points, and first of all, let me know if my audio gives you any trouble, Bill. Hopefully, I'm coming through though. Okay.
Perfectly
Um,
clear.
but it's interesting, when you started out talking about how you teach in VR, right? That's one of those huge things that you have to tackle once you decide to use this modality in your program. And I've kind of come to see that there are several different kind of approaches to how you use VR in the classroom. And I think where everybody starts out, or at least a lot of the medical field, and Mitch probably has something to say about this, is with the procedural based stuff, right? They want to kind of walk somebody through a process. And we have a lot of that content in our library in Acadicus where you're putting in a Foley or an NG tube or identifying hazards in a room, right? So there's that kind of checklist uh, uh, process you can go through. But I think there's this bigger, I guess, higher level methodology that you can use with VR that you're describing, where it's almost this gamification to training and education, right? You kind of get to use the magic of VR to put your students in this place they'll never be able to go to, right? Well,
Yeah.
I'm guessing probably never go to, right? Probably not going to do botany on Mars for the next maybe 50 years.
Right,
Um,
exactly.
but and I know you've joked before about even doing EMS training on Mars, right? You
Yeah.
know, but it's that kind of thing that really stimulates the students, and I think really helps with that process where they ingrain the understanding and knowledge better than like your example earlier about using PowerPoint or reading a chapter in a book or even looking at a video, right? It's that engagement in that context that
Yeah.
really helps them understand and retain what they're learning.
Yeah.
And that's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And it made things a lot more engaging. I did a little cardiology lecture for one of our programs. I won't mention the program, but I did a cardiology lecture, and they asked me to just come in, do an overall cardiology lecture, like tell us a little bit about it, what drugs would have what effects on the heart, performance enhancers, those kind of things. And so I was like, yeah, absolutely. I went in and did this lecture on that. And I had it, I was set up so there was me, and then I had it on the projector, but then I had the Acadicam in there so that I could move the Acadicam where I wanted it to, and you'd have more of a little bit better visual so that you're not looking at this thing and like feeling that you're gonna fall over. And so I did that, and I stood up in front of the class, and I was manipulating all the assets and all of that, and I was talking about the heart. And then the instructor, when it was done, so we even put the lights down so that the visual was better. The instructor, when it was done, she said, normally if I were going to turn the lights down, I'd be afraid that people would start to get a little sleepy. She said no one did. They were all just riveted to what you were talking about. And she said, and it even was a little hard because afterwards I was going to talk about the bones in the skeleton, and I had to bring up my PowerPoint and start talking about the bones in the skeleton. And I went, yeah, she's like, that was a really tough act to follow. And I said, well, you know, we have the bones of the skeleton too. So if you want to do that in the future, let's get together and I can teach you how to now do that lecture and pull the skeleton up and explain all the bones of the skeleton. And so it was just, it's yes, we think of it so much as a sim lab, and I think that's a great way to think of Acadicus. But we bring so many things out of the sim lab, right? We take a lot of things out of the sim lab, we bring them into our classes, and we start teaching and talking about them in our classes and how this is going to work, and so I think that's another power of the tool itself. So
Hey, Bill, Mitch had
yeah.
mentioned that the chat was disabled. Are you just
Oh,
able to allow them to speak? I think,
yeah, I'll enable allowed to talk for everyone.
yeah, why don't we just go ahead and do that?
Yep, and I just did that for both Deanna and Mitch. So
Thanks.
either one of you can feel free to to pop in, ask a question, anything like that. So the next thing that I wanted to show, and this is a little bit less of an on the horizon as we're currently using, but I'll show you a preview of something that's coming as well. So our veterinarian, Dr. Sabella, came to us and said, I want to be able to use this. And one of the hard things for us is that we have to rent animals in order to do some of these things. And then when it comes to like large animal anatomy, I mean, everybody probably remembers when you were younger, you dissected a frog or you dissected a pig or whatever, a cat, whatever. People did all kinds of different dissections. Um, but the key here was we're talking about a horse or we're talking about a cow. And those are not easy things to have around that we can dissect. Oh, I'm in the danger zone. That we can dissect very easily. And so one of the things that we went to was how can we get it so that we can, maybe dissect this horse but not have to buy a big horse carcass, right? And how can we do that? How can we now dissect this horse? And so that's what we did with layering, where we had the different layers. You can see all the different layers of the horse there that I had that I was able to turn on and turn off. And Dr. Sabella, what he did was he did a lecture using this asset on both the equine and the bovine anatomy, and more so to their gut and how their gut works, right? Because the bovine gut is way different than the equine gut, and the equine gut is really a lot different than the human gut and even small animals, right? And I mean, I didn't know how different the gut of a cat was to the gut of a dog, right? And the differences between them as one is a pure carnivore, that kind of stuff. I was like, wow, that's amazing. So the gut is much, much different. And one of the things that we leveraged in here, and I'm going to stop sharing just for a second because I realized I probably did not share my audio. So let me share again. And this time, let me share my audio. So share sound. Okay. And then we'll do Acadicus. Here we go. And what we did in here was we did something that was pretty powerful as well that you can do in Acadicus is we did 3D recordings. So under my recordings tab here, I just go in and I find Dr. Sai's lecture. And there's Dr. Sai. That was day 3. And then I hit play.
In human medicine, there's just one species, right? And so, do I have my back to you guys again? Yeah. Okay. This is what, and that's what happened yesterday. Is I turned to look at the stomach, and I was facing away from you. So,
looking at
yeah. Okay.
the camera in
Yeah.
here, you're good.
So anyway, in humans, it's just one species, right? And we are what are called gastric, right? We have a simple stomach that has a single chamber. So it's very much like this stomach, which is a horse stomach. Ours is very much like it, and I'll point out the differences in a second. And so carnivores, like our dogs and cats, or even more omnivorous animals like swine, have a simple single-chambered stomach. it's a misconception that cattle or other ruminants have four stomachs. They don't really. They have a foregut, F-O-R-E gut, that has four chambers to it, F-O-U-R. One of those chambers is analogous to the simple stomach of our monogastric animals.
Right. So you get the idea there, right? So then we went from just using it as an in-lecture, in-person tool to now I can do a 3D recording. And you saw I was moving all around in that 3D recording and watching Dr. Sabella talk about the differences in the guts there, which I found really interesting. I mean, I love anatomy and physiology anyway, but I found really interesting. And it was great to be able to sit there and kind of listen to this expert talk about all of these things that he knows and he does. And now I mean, like, here I am on my computer just going and now listening to this expert talk. So this does tie in, and I'll do this quickly, with an on the horizon for us. So we have a barn out back at Madison College. And I found out that what we do is we rent animals to come into that barn so that we can learn things, obviously learn things about their anatomy and all that, but then also learn about how to deal with these animals. Like, how can I deal with this animal and deal with this animal safely? These are big animals. When you get up against if you've never been around a cow, that's not an area you want to hang out in. And you think, well, yeah, no, I don't want to get pooed on. Well, no, that's not it. You don't want to get kicked. And so it actually talks about, whoops, let's not do that. Let's see, I already learned something. Look at that. Let's go around the cow this way. And what this is our actual barn. So I went in and took pictures of our barn, and then we created this in virtual reality. And so now we can talk about, like, what are the areas that are safest to move to. And we can bring students into this. They can do this safety briefing with their instructor, who now can show them, here are the areas you want to go to, here are the areas you don't want to go to, and here's why. And this way, we don't have to try to do this with an actual animal, because we have had students get hurt, thankfully, not seriously. But we also had one of the cows get out and start running down Wright Street when no one was around, and that became problematic as well. So now we can not replace simulation, but augment or add to the simulation, and especially like when it comes to safety issues as well. And we did that with a horse in here as well. We have a horse that same thing. Now I'm going to still stay well clear. Okay. And it actually tells us that the areas to approach, and then the instructor can explain why do we approach more often on the right-hand side than on the left-hand side. So that was just this is an on the horizon. This is not used with our students yet. We're going to be implementing this probably coming up in the fall, where the students are going to get to start using this as a functional asset. And then we're going to kind of go back and review. How did things go? Did we find out, did we learn things, those kind of things? And then obviously we're going to add to this as well, ways that we can utilize this barn environment too. So I'm going to stop sharing. Any questions at the moment? All right, excellent. Let me. So Rick, do you have any on the horizon items that are coming up?
Interesting thing, Bill, if you want to pull up, if you could for us,
Yeah.
and go into lab 0979.
Okay.
And this is another one of these things where I find it's just like a creative use of Acadicus, right? Again, it's not kind of the typical mannequin-based sim or scenario, but I am working on this with a school with a social work program. And one of the things that they wanted to explore with their students was the fact that tobacco use is still a prevalent issue in our culture, in our society.
Yeah.
And so we experience, and that's kind of the best explanation for it right now. If you go into the Sims and look for, I think it's Smoking 01.
Smoking, okay. Yep, Smoking 01. There it is.
Right? And so what you'll find when you go in here, right, is it's kind of this complete visual and auditory experience that kind of walks a student through this. At first, you land in our lobby
Yeah.
area, and I've kind of made it dark. There's a little recording off to the side that introduces the experience to the student and kind of says, look, you know, this is kind of turning the thought portion of your brain off, and it's more about the visceral, emotional things that you see and feel as you walk through this experience and think about the history of smoking and tobacco use over time. And now you're in the rotunda where, you know, all those old ads of the 50s, 60s, and 70s kind of talked about smoking. And then you've got the video loops going of smoking being shown in video and movies and TV. And then you can see on each side of the rotunda, there's kind of this no smoking or smoking, kind of either, yeah, I'm smoking and I can't stop, or I want to stop and not smoke.
Yeah.
And each of those kind of leads you to a different experience. If you go to the I can't door, and again, this is all kind of, again, we're working on this together to build this out. If you go to the
yep, the I can't.
smoking permitted, yep, go in there. And that leads you, it's interesting because it's another use of the Mars location bill.
Oh, yeah.
That kind of I use to produce this very arid, dry experience where, again, you walk and then you see these giant healthcare, you know, we took our characters and made them 20 feet tall. And then again, you have these you know, big cigarettes and cigarette packs. And I took some of the patients that we might use in our you know, CHF experience. Yeah. And the whole idea is, again, to give the participant this sense of, okay, you know, so what happens as you decide or you continue to be a smoker or you take up smoking, you know, and it's this idea of this looming healthcare system over top of you. And you kind of walk through, and there, again, some videos about what happens to you physiologically if you smoke. Yeah. And you're, you know, you're, in this particular case, we're trying to make more of an emotional impact than we are kind of this thought impact. Yeah. So again, this is that kind of really creative use of the platform where there's not this intent necessarily. You know, we've all heard the lectures and have been bombarded with understanding about the impact of using tobacco. Yeah. Yet we still see lots and lots of people continue to smoke. And so this is about getting at that emotional level. And Bill, if you stop and actually play that little video, that big video looming up there.
Terry.
Yes, a lot of us know that. Yes. And so we kind of drop that in there.
Yes. I remember this. Wow. Yeah, that's amazing, Rick. Like this is a great, like, you know, this is lecture without the lecture.
Yes, exactly. You know?
That's one of the things I love, lecture without the lecture. Everybody's standing around.
You see, the kids are standing around the cigarette pack. We took our children characters.
Yeah, almost praising the cigarettes there.
Yeah, how cool is that, right? We all remember that peer pressure, right, when we were younger.
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. Yeah, I smoked for 7.5 years. I started when I was 18.
Yep.
I quit. Say that again?
I said, yeah, see there, and probably knowing or having heard the same lectures many of us did growing up.
Absolutely. Yeah, I quit. It's funny because I used to on the back of my ambulance after I dropped my patient off, I'd sit on the back of my ambulance and smoke a cigarette while I was writing my report back in the days when we still wrote them out, you know. But I was sitting on the back of the ambulance writing my report about an emphysema patient. And I think that's when it finally hit me like, hey, Bill, you know, but I smoked for 7.5 years. I quit in August of 2001. And and I'm sure those of you that have been in EMS, healthcare, those kind of things, you know how stressful September of 2001 became. And the 2 years, especially after that, when we were dealing with all the, the concerns about anthrax attacks and all of that. So, I got to suffer through that period where I was, really, really, really badly wanting to smoke, but I realized how important it was to not. So that's really interesting.
Hmm. And Deanna
And then
asked the question about how long did it take to build this out?
hmm,
And Deanna, the building wasn't what was so time consuming. Actually, kind of gathering the media, right? Finding all the images and the pictures, and then once you had them, probably and there's even another door. Yeah, Bill just went in the door, which is the
yeah.
non-smoking door, and here we land in our Caribbean beach, right? And the idea here is we're going to put yoga and meditation videos and not the patch,
Yeah.
alternatives to smoking. And we
Yeah.
just haven't populated that out yet. Again, it's kind of getting them finding the media, but probably all told, putting those three areas together, as you see so far, was maybe 3-4 hours.
Well, and the beauty of it is that the environments are already built. We built these environments as areas that we could do some lecture in and stuff like that. If we're going to do lecture, which, I'm not, I'm not one that's completely like, lecture is gone. Flipping the classroom, that's it. No more lecture. I'm not quite there, admittedly. And so, what I want is I want to have areas where things are more interesting. And I used to do when it was nice down in Florida, I used to do some lecture outside. We used to just go sit outside and we'd enjoy the day and we'd have some lecture and some I hesitate to call it lecture because it was more discussion with me. Um, but that's what we used to do. And that's kind of where this came from was like, let's do something, let's build something like this. I mean, I wanted to teach cardiology on the moon, but let's build something for the beach. That would be great too. And then, let's have the Mars environment and let's have a bunch of different environments that we can work in, jungles and all those kind of things. So yeah. And not have to
Well, I
get eaten by
think
mosquitoes.
that's neat when you think about futuristic stuff with VR, Bill. Having your students drop into your class from home in their VR headset, where you still get that sense of presence and socialization. Yet, hey, yeah, I didn't have to jump in the car or trailer or deal with weather or anything else, and I'm still in a space, Bill, listening to his lecture. But now he's able to take a cross section cardiac muscle and blow it up 10 times the stuff you can.
We are losing your audio just a little bit here, Rick. But I get what Rick was saying is, and and one of the things is, when we started teaching from home during the pandemic, and I had been doing some teaching from distance and some teaching from home and those kind of things for years before that. So I knew how to do it, and I kind of knew, what my best practices were. But then making sure that I could convey that to the faculty that were then coming to me and going, okay, how do we do this? Um, well, that was and we all know that that's what had to happen, right? So we're all teaching from home and we're trying to find really great ways to engage our students and make things interesting and make things fun. And I just look at it in that way. I look at it as this is a way that I can engage my students, make things interesting and make things fun and not have to not have to try to figure a whole lot of stuff out. Like I can bring stuff like that media into platform and work with that media. And now one of the things that I do, and I'll announce a big drop coming up, but one of the things that I do is that I like to make videos, 2D videos based on my 3D recordings, and then take those and post them up so that people can then see them and comment, ask questions, whatever it is, or make it sort of a lecture style environment. So that's just another way to add to it when it's your actual instructor doing it. I can play a YouTube video for students, uh, about cardiology, but they want to learn from me. I mean, a lot of them were like, if I did that too much, they would kind of be like, okay, can you just send me all these links and I'll watch all of this, and then what do I necessarily need you for? Well, in the time of AI and all of that, you still need the instructor. We still need the instructor. We don't want to just turn everything over to AI and go, okay, well, here we go. We don't want to do that. So, what's a way to make sure that we're involved and we're part of this is that we do things like this that are much more engaging to the students, and they don't just go, well, I'm just going to go to Chat GPT and learn what Bill was talking about. They want to learn from me. They want to learn from us. They want to learn from subject matter experts. And this is just another thing that we can add in to make everything we do more engaging, but at the same time, more fun for us too. Because I'll be honest with you, it's been a blast. It's just been a blast doing this stuff. It's so much fun. And when it's that much fun for you, it doesn't seem like work. So,
Yeah, I wonder if Mitch has something that he might add in here. He does obviously a lot of teaching himself in VR. What do you think, Mitch? Anything that you really have used that you found a really creative twist on your teaching methods in VR, or?
Mainly what I have been doing lately is I've been taking the VR into the classroom and I use it as a tool for my students in the actual classroom, so they don't come to the lab. I will bring in a couple laptops and I hook one into the AV system. And so the students then, I let them come up and they put on the headset and they have certain things that I'll ask them about to do. The pharmacology one is one that I'm use that for a lot. Also the birthing scenario, because for our nursing students, the birthing scenario is a little more than what they would really need, especially in their second semester of nursing school. So we've started using that as kind of we bring it in the classroom and like, okay, as we're lecturing, we use the scenario as the way to kind of visualize what those things do. And like with pharmacology, like when we say like, oh, it's going to lower the blood pressure, but then when they give them med, I lower the blood pressure so the students actually see that effect. And then now I'm working on blood administration for our advanced skills course, where students are going to come in and they're going to do a virtual reality learning with me. And we're going to work on, because right now our blood administration is here's a lecture, here's a quiz, and you're done. Because doing a checkoff with that is really, really expensive with buying blood bags and filling them with blood and working through that process. And it got really expensive. So that was something we had to remove, to save some money. And so now I'm going to do it in VR and it won't cost us anything extra. So there's lots of ways you can apply this and use it. I'm also actually recording a VR lecture. I am importing the PowerPoint of a faculty into a med surg room that I made for kidney failure. And so we're actually going to start recording next week and start working on getting that all cut together and pieced together. So students, instead of just watching the PowerPoint, are actually going to see the instructor providing the care to the patient and I'm going to be playing the role of the patient for her. So that way, then, there's some interactivity and the students can actually see and hear what it is we should be doing instead of just getting um, a PowerPoint and they get told what to do, but they don't see it. And they're not getting that kinesthetic portion as well with the movement. So trying to incorporate all three learning styles into the tool.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that really just, your students are just going to come out with a more long lasting understanding. We can give students a very good understanding of these issues and disease processes and those kind of things and treatment plans. From case studies, we've been doing those for a very long time, and many of us are extremely good at presenting case studies. But then to add to that, right, it's like take that case study and now we're adding the visual that goes along with it. That's the impact there. And that just sounds really, really cool. I just talked today, so another on the horizon thing for us at Madison College. I just talked today with one of our nursing instructors, and we're going to be doing some mental health stuff in virtual reality. I think that Acadicus sort of is perfect for this because it's not as much based on skill and giving a med and starting an IV and those kind of things. It's not as much based on that. It's more based on learning how to communicate with a patient who may not want to communicate with you, or may have difficulty communicating with you, or may communicate in a different way than what you're used to. Because those are all good possibilities when we're talking about patients who we may see as psychiatric, right? So they're having a psychiatric problem, or maybe they're not. Maybe they're having a communication problem. So, that's sort of where we're going in the on the horizon. We've done some of that before. I did some of that back in 2020 2021 with my students, but it's just building on top of what we already use and adding more to it and making it a little bit more complex, so to speak. I don't like the word complex because it makes it sound like it's difficult. I don't see it as all that difficult. I think the complexity in it is what makes it special. If something is too simplistic, it almost becomes sort of boring. The student feels like they can answer the questions too quickly. And so this is making it so that it's a little bit more, takes a little bit more thought behind it to understand what we can do for those patients. The other thing is our EMTs are going to be doing some clinicals utilizing virtual reality. It's kind of helping out with mannequins, the amount of mannequins that we have, how we allocate those mannequins, and then how many rotations they have to do in order to get everybody through and using those mannequins. And one of the patients is a pediatric patient, so we have less of those mannequins than we do of the adult mannequins. So it makes it a little bit more difficult. So that's one of the things that virtual reality is going to be used for, sort of helping in a gap, finding an area where we could use an extra set of hands, and we've got Bill, and he can operate all of this. And then the instructor is just going to sit right next to me, and we're going to go through those simulations. They've given me the sims, they've laid them out for me. I now have the simulation that they are using with all the other students. So it's not something that we have to recreate from scratch. It's not something that we have to go, well, is it in there? Well, yeah, it's in there because you already have the simulation. You just take that simulation that you have, and now I'm going to go into that scene and just make sure, is there something in there that I need? Oh, hey, we need a nebulizer. So grab a nebulizer, stick the nebulizer in there, and we're good to go. So those are the two newest on the horizons for us. And then, just trying to think if there was anything else. There's just been so much this week and this past week that's just been kind of it's been a little overwhelming, but definitely fun. So, Rick, I'm trying to think of other things in the on the horizon.
I know one of the things that the developers are going to be releasing in the next few weeks, I believe it's in QA now, and that's our trauma patient bill.
Yes.
And I don't know if you've gotten a sneak peek at that yet, but I know this patient will allow um, the selection of either stab or gunshot wounds to the torso.
Excellent.
And so that's going to be added to our library, and there'll be a whole trauma scenario and scene that'll be shared with everybody that's in the Acadicus community, and that's really in demand.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's huge. That's going to be great. I talked a little bit with John about that early on, like what was going on, and it sounds really awesome. It's definitely going to get use on our side.
Yep. Yeah, I think there's going to be um, chest tubes and equipment that you're going to be able to use that you would normally, bring to bear when treating
Yep.
somebody with those types of trauma wounds.
Yeah. Yeah. Most definitely. Yeah. And that's
And
good
and
across.
go ahead.
That's good across nursing, EMS, respiratory therapy, all of that. That's good for
Mhm.
all those programs.
Well, it's interesting you talk about that, because one of the other things that I've started to hear more and more about from our community is this idea of being able to bring in cross-discipline teams to talk about scenes and scenario, right? I mean, none of us work in a vacuum in healthcare. And you just rattled off, right? There's physicians, there's nurses, there's respiratory, IV therapy. I mean, and how often do we get the chance to kind of work in scenes or scenarios where all those individuals are looking at their piece of the treatment plan or the care of a patient, and then being able to communicate it across, to the other disciplines, what needs to happen as a
Yeah.
priority, in what step, how do they help each other, so that
Yeah.
later on, when it happens in real life, we're not tripping over each other. And so those
Absolutely.
kinds of exercises, I'd be really excited to start seeing grow within, colleges and healthcare organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think there's a lot of use for that. So and then the last thing for that I talked about earlier on was like how we got here. I just, especially for newer people, I know Deanna, you said you're sort of new to the position. Um, for the newer people, I deal with faculty who are on the very lowest level, have never even put on a VR headset, to faculty who are like, hey, I've been doing all of this stuff with Revit and Enscape and all of that, and Unreal Engine, and I'm just like, okay, you know way more than I do about that, right? And so I deal with people on either end of the scale, and I know that the team at Acadicus is the same way. We deal with anybody wherever you're at, and we can definitely help you when it comes to any of these things and how to implement those kind of stuff, those kind of things. But we did not start. I didn't start with a 12 bay virtual reality, extended reality center, any of that. Ours has only been open for the past year. I didn't start there. I started off with, it was me, a laptop, and a headset. And that was it. I think actually I have my original laptop. It finally died, unfortunately, but there it is. This is my Alienware laptop. This is it. So started off with my Alienware laptop and a headset, and then I was just bringing things around to students, and I was working on it in my class and those kind of things. So it doesn't matter what level you're on. The key is just to try to implement what you can when you can. And I just talked to some faculty the other day from another college who had come to visit our XR center. And I said, how are things going? And they're like, well, we haven't done much implementation yet. And I'm like, well, that's okay. You can do this. That's fine. What have you done? And we talked about what they had done. And I was like, you've done more than a lot of people have done. Believe me, you're way ahead of some places. So don't ever feel like, this is impossible. It's this monstrous mountain to climb. there's stairs, just one stair at a time, and you'll get there. And you know, and all of that stuff starts to sort of work itself out, especially if you are really excited about doing it. Like if you're really interested and you're really excited about doing it, you can keep pushing it forward. You know, just keep moving forward. Doesn't matter how you move forward, just keep moving forward. And you will definitely get to some of the places. Like Mitch and I are in very very great positions where, you know, we're able to do so much with what we have. But we both started out, you know, very, very low and not having a whole lot of stuff in the early days. So we remember how that is and how we can help others, you know, get through that transitory time, that initial time, you know, and how we can get you on that path as well. So.
Yep, we're here to support everybody in the community to be successful in their implementation. And I think we're all very excited because we do see the implications for the future of this as a teaching tool on the horizon. I mean, you won't be able to deny the power and the impact of it once you start to use it, because then it becomes like the, you know, first time once you kind of figured out how to use a spreadsheet or PowerPoint, right? Then it becomes indispensable. And I think VR is going to be very much like that. I think it's going to have a longer curve of adoption because there is the hardware piece and there's an investment. But once it's there, it's, you know, the sky's kind of the limit, right? You're at the limit of your imagination for what and how you want to teach a certain topic.
Yeah, I was talking with a faculty member the other day, and we kind of giggled about, you know, using the overhead and transparencies, right? And how that was like that was the thing, you know, overhead and transparencies, man. You know, and then how we transitioned to PowerPoint, and that transition to PowerPoint was there was a lot of difficulty there. Like, okay, wait, how do I do this, and how do I annotate, and how do I, you know, like you know, we had a hard time initially, but then we kept going, and even during the pandemic, I had one instructor who had such a hard time kind of, how am I going to give my students the quiz, right? I don't have any of this built in Blackboard or anything like that. We've always done paper quizzes. And that instructor mailed them the paper quizzes, right? And I was like, that's great. That's amazing. But let's work on how to then get it switched over to utilizing um, I just saw that question. I'm going to get to that here in a second, Deanna. But let's get to how we can use the electronic version of it. So, Deanna said our system is still boxed up and collecting dust. It seems less intimidating to get started now. Always learn new ways. I can see us using VR. Yeah, you know, to me, that was one of the most disconcerting things. So it didn't happen in our program, but it did happen in one of our other programs where they decided they wanted to get their own equipment. They said, we want to get our own equipment. We want to have our own lab. We don't want to have to come to the XR Center. We want our own stuff. And so, you know, I'm never going to deny anybody. I'm not the VR police. I'm not going to come in and say, no, you can't. And they went and they bought their own stuff. They bought computers, they bought headsets, all of that. And then a year and a half later, the program director came to the XR Center and said, okay, listen, so all of this stuff is sitting in the boxes still, and it's on a storage shelf. And just like you said, Deanna, collecting dust. And he said, well, can we do something about this? And I was like, yeah, we can. And now it's no longer collecting dust. It's being used. And we found the right instructor to help out with it. And so all of their stuff is now being used, and their students are really enjoying it. And that was outside of Acadicus. Like that was something that I didn't initially even know how to work. And so we just worked with them to figure it out. And so what I told them is, don't operate in silence. Don't sit and go, I got to figure this out. Someone has done it. Someone has figured it out. Get some help. Get someone that can help you out. And Deanna, we're here for you. We're here for you.
Yeah,
Don't.
absolutely. I mean, you've got great folks like Bill and Mitch right here on the line who are pioneers here, right? They've kind of been there, done that a little bit. Not that we're all still not exploring and figuring things out, but it's not intimidating anymore, right? You're not so afraid of breaking something, right? It's like, oh yeah, let's throw that together and see what comes out the other end. And it's those kind of creative sessions. Bill talks a lot about times he's just spent with John going, hey, what if we do this? And what if we put that over there or pull this in or take this? I mean, you can't break something in VR, right? You just go back and redo it over.
And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. A lot of the fun that I've had in working for Acadicus is that, I've been able to go in and start, building these things and putting them together. So yeah, Mitch, that's right. Mitch does do a ton of building with other Acadicus users. So yeah, we're always happy, to meet with people and to help people out. And I can only speak for myself. I certainly can't speak for Mitch. But let me know how I can help. So we're 2 minutes from the end here. Do we have anything else to mention?
I think I'm good, Bill.
Excellent.
Well, thanks for
Excellent.
leading this thing today. Sorry, I
Of course.
couldn't be live online with you on camera.
No, it's no problem at all. And the little announcement that I was going to make is that so I had a TikTok channel at one point. I'm sort of I've taken those videos down off of there, cleaned them up a little bit, and then they are going to show up on my YouTube channel. So my YouTube channel is my last name, Ballo, and then Medic, Medic, Ballo Medic. So you can just search me up on YouTube if you want to see any of those videos. They will be dropping here probably at the beginning of next week. I've just been working on it little by little as time has gone on, getting them the way that I want them. And then I'm going to drop those on YouTube coming this week. There is some stuff on YouTube already, some stuff on my YouTube channel for VR already, but there's going to be a big drop of a whole bunch of videos coming up here in the next probably few days to a week. So just wanted to let everybody know that. It's always fun to look at some of the
That's
stuff
great.
that we're
Yeah,
doing. So, yeah.
cool.
All right. Well, I am going to go ahead and stop the recording here.